The story of the great leader, Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was a German politician and leader of the Nazi Party, who rose to power as Chancellor of Germany in 1933 and later became dictator of Germany from 1934 until his death in 1945. Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in the town of Braunau am Inn, in Austria. He moved to Germany in 1913 and served in the German army during World War I, where he was injured and awarded the Iron Cross. After the war, Hitler joined the German Workers' Party, which later became the Nazi Party. In 1925 Hitler re-established the Nazi Party. Its membership continued to grow, particularly at the end of the decade, when Germans were hit hard by the Great Depression and needed a scapegoat for their troubles. Hitler and his party were seen as dynamic and youthful. In the national elections of 1932, the Nazi Party won 230 seats of a total of 599, giving it 37.3% of the vote, making it the largest political party in the German parliament. On January 30, 1933, as a result of backroom deals, Hitler was named Chancellor of Germany. Despite the fact that his party did not hold an absolute majority in the government, Hitler was able to gain increasing power. On February 27, Hitler masterminded a fire in the parliament building, and used it as an excuse to destroy his political opponents in the government. Less than a week later, Hitler passed a law annulling German democracy and bequeathing unto him absolute power. With the death of the German president Paul von Hindenburg on August 2, 1934, Hitler assumed that office, as well. From within his racial view of the world, Hitler sought to revitalize Germany. Thus, among his main goals were building up the army and implementing anti-Jewish measures. On April 1, 1933, an anti-Jewish boycott took place all over Germany, see also boycott, anti-Jewish, and on April 7, a law was passed making it legal to fire Jews from their civil service jobs. In September 1935, the racial Nuremberg laws were passed and the Nazis introduced a series of anti-Jewish measures excluding the Jewish population from all facets of German life. Meanwhile, the Nazis had also begun establishing concentration camps where their political and ideological opponents were imprisoned. In March 1938, Hitler annexed Austria to Germany. This added almost 200,000 more Jews to Hitler's domain. Later that year, he was given the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia as a result of the Munich Conference, and in March 1939, he took over the rest of the Czech lands and established a puppet regime in Slovakia. The first massacres of Jews in the Soviet Union were carried out by Einsatzgruppen units, regular army units, various police units, and local collaborators. Soon, Hitler decided to extend the mass murder of Jews to all of Europe. His regime established extermination camps where millions of Jews were abused and exterminated. However, by the end of 1942, Hitler's luck began to change. The Soviet army began winning battles against the Germans on the Eastern Front, and in 1943 and 1944 the Western Allies, including the United States, which had joined the war in December 1941, were beating the Germans on the Southern and Western fronts. He blamed others for his failures, and in 1944, some of his generals unsuccessfully tried to assassinate him. As Germany lost increasingly more battles and military defeat seemed imminent, Hitler continued the final solution. By April 2, 1945, Hitler was able to brag about the murder of European Jewry. However, less than a month later, on April 30, 1945, Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker, with his wife Eva Braun. He will be remembered as the man who orchestrated and implemented one of the worst evils in history. Hitler's political career began with his participation in the failed Beer Hall Putsch of 1923, a coup attempt against the government of Bavaria. He was arrested and imprisoned for treason, during which time he wrote his autobiography, Mein Kampf, My Struggle, which laid out his vision for a future Germany. Hitler's Nazi Party rose to prominence in the 1930s, capitalizing on the economic and political instability of the time. Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany in 1933, and he quickly consolidated power, suppressing opposition and establishing a one-party dictatorship. Under Hitler's leadership, Germany embarked on a campaign of aggression, first annexing Austria and then invading Poland, which led to the outbreak of World War II. Hitler's military successes in the early years of the war were followed by a series of defeats, and by 1944, Germany was in a state of collapse. Hitler's final days were spent in his bunker in Berlin, where he became increasingly erratic and paranoid. On April 30, 1945, he committed suicide by gunshot, as Allied forces closed in on Berlin. Hitler's legacy is one of death and destruction. Under his leadership, millions of people, including 6 million Jews, were systematically murdered in the Holocaust. His political ideology of racism and nationalism, which he called National Socialism or Nazism, has been widely condemned as a heinous ideology of hate. Today, Hitler is widely regarded as one of history's most notorious figures, and his regime serves as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and extremism. Kindly share, like, subscribe.